Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. This is your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, System of Intelligence for IT Operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Thanks again to all of you, our listeners, for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you like what we do, please comment, share, like this episode in your favorite app, and we will keep sharing great conversations ad-free. We talk a lot about the fusion of humans and machines. We refer frequently to AI and augmented intelligence, not just artificial, but augmented. We've had some fascinating discussions recently with Dr. Marc about AI ethics, and more recently, with Gary Bowles from Singularity University about transhumanism. We've also discussed the responsibility of developers to be aware of how bias creeps into automated decisions with none other than Tiernan Ray from ZDNet. And we also got to meet Krishna Gade, the CEO of Fiddler, whose company specializes in AI explainability. So many of our conversations revert back to a common theme. The trend toward automation will liberate humans from mundane tasks, but only if we actively mitigate the risk of bad data to perpetuate these latent biases. Today's guest has dedicated her career to exploring the ethics of AI at the intersection of how humans interact with machines. Kai Nunez is the Vice President of Research and Insights at Salesforce. She helps harness the customer voice to inform product teams about how to develop AI products responsibly. Kai's an expert in thinking about user experiences with a focus on the subtle ways software can have unintended consequences. This conversation should be particularly useful for anyone developing software or just planning a career in technology. It will form the foundation for how the next billion employees interact with technology. I've really been looking forward to this one for weeks, ever since hearing Kai speak at the VentureBeat Women in Data Science Conference. She is that rare voice in our community who proudly speaks truth to power. Without further ado, Kai, it's really my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by just having you share a little bit about your background and how you got into this space.
Thank you, Dan, for that amazing introduction. I don't deserve it. I don't feel like I deserve it, but I appreciate it. I got into the field of research and insights sort of as an opportunity to help shape the needs of our customers for tech. I saw that with the software development lifecycle, having been a former management consultant and having done large-scale implementations over my tenure, that the needs of the customers, the needs of the users, were oftentimes overlooked. And so I made it my personal agenda to try to bring some shape to what research and insights might be in a technical environment. And I have had a lot of challenges in that journey, as you might imagine, because it's really hard to commoditize and to tie revenue to insights about your customers. But that didn't stop me. So I have been doing that now for 11 years at Salesforce. Prior to that, as I mentioned, I did management consulting at scale with a focus on user experience. And that was a manifestation of my graduate degree from DePaul in human-computer interaction. I mention that only because I found my love of artificial intelligence actually at DePaul, where I was working with NLP. My father happens to be a linguist, so that was my focus. And that sort of became the font of the work and space that I wanted to do. However, at that time, ages ago, I'm not going to talk about the years, there was no money in it. So I couldn't necessarily get a job in artificial intelligence unless I wanted to work for Dragon Speaking Naturally at that point in time. So fast forward to today, I have the luxury of being able to actually work in artificial intelligence, but also bring and weave through the value of the human experience with artificial intelligence at Salesforce, whilst also grooming a team of researchers to have that same sort of lens of the value of building amazing products for the needs of the individuals that are using it, and also for those individuals that you might not intend to use it.
We lived dog years in Silicon Valley, so 11 years at the same tech company. Gosh, we'll call that more like 77 years.
Yeah, for sure. I've reinvented myself like 4 times. So
Pretty impressive. So looking back on the arc of your career just at Salesforce, describe what you're most proud of that you've accomplished.
I've had the ability to build an incredibly diverse team that I think is a representative of the people for whom we are building tools. I think that's a luxury to have the agency to be able to pick and choose individuals, to give individuals opportunities that might not necessarily fit the prescriptive description of what roles you're supposed to be filling, and to take risks that you wouldn't otherwise take because of the norms of the business and the culture that you're bringing people into. I would say that's the one thing that I'm very proud of because it affords me the opportunity to sort of pull forward what I think are important parts of leadership and management, which is to be values led, purpose led, to lead with integrity, to give people space to make decisions and to fail. I didn't have that coming up. And so that for me is sort of a gift back to corporate America to a certain degree, so that like everything's a long game, right? So that I can, in small ways, continue to change the narrative of what it means to work in tech, so that you can feel like you belong and that you have agency and that your voice and your work has meaning.
What is one finding that you or your research teams have unveiled in the course of your interaction with users that is non-intuitive, that maybe help shape the product culture at Salesforce?
Non-intuitive. So I think I find this finding to be amusing and unexpected. But our biggest competitor from the research that we've embarked upon over the course of my tenure at Salesforce, our biggest competitor to our sales products in particular, is literally pen and paper. The other one's Excel, but oftentimes it's a paper Rolodex on someone's desk for those individuals, because honestly, not everybody is tech savvy when it comes to the way that they manage their sales teams. We have an entire cohort of individuals that don't necessarily feel confident and comfortable that documenting their work in a tech platform is the way for them to assure their success in their own companies. So they still keep these sort of like paper and pencil based artifacts, which makes it difficult for you to do reports and analysis at scale, right? Because the data is not in the system, so you can't generate models off of it. So at the foundation, the reason that insight for me is very compelling and sort of like cognitively different than what you would expect is that if the expectation is that everyone's putting data into the system, the truth is they're not. So then how accurate is that data? And then it becomes not a conversation at all about the veracity of the data, or rather the AI or the tech that you would wrap around it, but about the human behavior that you have to change. And this sort of transition of the human experience into tech. And how do you get the people who are detractors to become adopters? That's what I absolutely love about tech anyway. Like it always boils down to the human and whether or not they're willing to play in the place that you created for them to play. So I think that answers your question, but that was one of those core findings that it continues. We beat that drumbeat on a day-to-day basis, because as you can imagine, like product managers, designers, they come in and they're like, tech is the way. I'm going to build this awesome widget. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. It's going to auto import all of the things. And then you just get stuck against this wall of like, absolutely not, paper and pencil.
We do a ton of navel gazing in Silicon Valley, and everything looks like versions of ourselves. And in that regard, you've been an amazing vocal champion for the importance of DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Salesforce as a culture is notorious for the Ohana spirit, and I know a lot of that comes from CEO Marc Benioff. Talk to us about how Salesforce as a culture embraces the values of DEI, and Maybe just start with the softball. Why does DEI matter in a technology company?
Thank you for the softball. I mean, I think you know that I'm going to state that in order for you to build good product, you need to have the individuals who are represented be a part of the manifestation of that product, right? Like it's just a gimme. Although I say it's a gimme, and you'd be astounded at how many people don't consider that a baseline, right? And that is infuriating to me on all levels. So, but we do have that construct in place at Salesforce where we recognize that that is an aspirational goal. Do we have all of our teams kind of modeling the same level of like diversity that I have on my team? Likely not, but it's the North Star is there and talked about openly, so that's helpful. The other reason that I believe that DEI is important within an organization is, really when it comes down to it, I want a place. I want a place to go. I want to create more places and spaces for me to be able to show up and be myself. And so the only way that I can manifest that is to be a staunch supporter of diversity, equity, inclusion. Because if I start at Salesforce, perhaps then it can continue to grow and manifest elsewhere. So the individuals that report to me who leave Salesforce can manifest that elsewhere because it has to start somewhere. So that's why it's important to me. And I would stick my career on it.
I love that thinking about kind of you're investing in the diaspora that
Yeah.
potentially transcends the teams that you're building.
Yeah, that's the hope. There aren't enough environments where people place this front and center. And I would like to see more of it. I'd like there to be conversations amongst my peers that don't feel uncomfortable about bringing up race, that see that that's an opportunity for an open conversation, wherein, we may have come from different backgrounds, but we all recognize that we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And in my opinion, in a work environment, it's always about manifesting meaning and building something that has value and impact in your environment. So hopefully I'm doing good by being good, but we'll see what the long tail looks like. I'm always kind of doing retrospectives to see if the work that I've done has actually manifested some measure of change. But that's like the 10 years, 11 years so far. So I've got some notes and signals that things are going in the right direction by my own team, by the shape of my larger R&I organization, by the sense of respect that I get from my peers for the work that we try to embark upon. One thing I'll mention is that at core to this and core to our team, we're a values-led organization, and we have this V2MA, which is vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. But one of the core values for the research and insights team is being respectful truth tellers, which I absolutely want to embody. And the other one is inclusivity and belonging and wellness. And so those are ways of like weaving in this construct of DEI, because you can't, if you're not being truthful with the work that you do, the message that you're partaking and sharing, then how can you manifest a change?
Culturally, how do you recognize that value of being respectful truth tellers?
I'll give you an example of sort of like walking the line, right? Where you might have a finding that is not going to necessarily be well received. So instead of just stating the thing blatantly, you say it in a way that acknowledges that this might not be well received, that there are multiple ways of interpreting the data, but that your responsibility is to bring forth that information in an objective manner and not to use it as hyperbole or as a tool for a manipulation. So that's kind of the manifestation of that. I'll give you an example. I had the luxury of being able to present to Marc Benioff some findings from a research study that I had embarked upon. And the message was not precisely what he wanted to hear. As a matter of fact, it was exactly the opposite of what he wanted to hear. And so I had two options. I could softball it and then, nope, we're going to take that direction. Or I could give him a hard line and say, I know this is not what you wanted to hear. However, these are the facts, and it's bounded in data. And so as a consequence of being respectful, the decisions are made not to proceed with that type of work going forward. So that would be an example. And I know I kind of like, what's the word? I glossed over some of the details, but the spirit is there.
I can envision how that conversation went with Benioff.
He was shocked and surprised and a little dismayed, but ultimately understood.
Almost every week on the show, we talk about the ethics of AI. And starting with the 101 version of the question, what does the term AI ethics mean to you?
It's so overused now. It's kind of lost its meaning, in my opinion. It's being bandied about, sort of like, what is it, whitewashed? But when I think of AI ethics, I oftentimes think of podcasts and calls and interviews, right? I hear the same thing over and over again. I hear this drumbeat of we must manifest change. We must control the bias in our data. We must be responsible for what we're building. We must deliver against it. We must have governance. Like all of the must-haves constantly come wrapped around AI ethics, and I think that's kind of part and parcel of ethics to begin with, as a weighty word. But what I'm not seeing is the applied part of it. And that is driving me bonkers. So I want to have AI ethics be applied. So it's applied ethics in technology. And what does that look like? We coming out of the definition mode of AI ethics and moving towards enablement, action, and change is what I would like there to be a closer association to AI ethics to be. That was a poorly phrased sentence, but I think you get my gist.
I find it's easiest to define the term because it's been cliched into oblivion in terms of examples. And I find the easiest way to think through, what that ambiguous term means is by first asking the question, what could go wrong? So when you have an audience, let's say of, product owners or developers within Salesforce, and you're helping them to appreciate the potential implications of the code they're writing or the features they're publishing, how would you help them understand the impact if things go wrong?
How would I help them understand the impact if things were to go wrong? Education is best. There are tools that we use at Salesforce, like consequence scanning and model cards, to kind of prime people to before, you should do this before the thing. I believe in failure being the best teacher. Unfortunately, with artificial intelligence and with the way that we're using these technologies today, failure with respect to AI ethics impacts people at scale. And so it's not an option. So then how do you roll that back so that you can actually create micro moments and experiences to sort of trial the thing that you're going to build before you build it, right? I think using AI modeling for worst case scenario testing, it's kind of meta, but why wouldn't we consider that as a way to manage that risk? Before you deploy any AI model, run it through the worst case scenarios, plural, and then see what the outcomes might be. When it comes to just thinking about the software development life cycle and all of the individuals that are actually tethered to building these products, I don't find that giving like a checklist and pounding people on the head with education necessarily manifests change in behavior. It's sort of like Psych 101, right? There's a bit of like, what's in it for me to do this? So there needs to be another motivator besides it's the right thing to do. And regulation might be the stick that we could use, but like, what's the carrot? That I haven't figured out yet. So far in my adventures and experiments, one of the carrots that I've seen that I've used is trying to bring back the fun to like these explorations with respect to artificial intelligence, recognizing that there's always a path to like the worst case scenario. But like, where's the fun? How can you play with these experiences? How can you co-create with others as you're building, so that you can do good, build great tools, and then have a cadre of individuals that are helping you sort of mitigate that risk. So it's not all on your head. The burden's not all yours. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of like the construct that I keep on noodling with, of like, it can't just be individual responsibility. It has to be something that is sort of like woven into the fabric of the way that you build as a unit and a team, and that it's unified responsibility so that there's not one throat to choke when something goes south.
In every other domain in society where there could be dangerous consequences if we're not acting responsibly, for example, food safety, healthcare, education, finance, there's some kind of regulatory framework, there's some kind of oversight to make sure things don't go wrong. In software development or in technology, uniquely as an industry, we're completely unregulated. And increasingly, as decisions are made automatically using algorithms and data, it's of increasing concern that it is absolutely unregulated. You are in the catbird seat, so to speak, when it comes to large technology organization that will increasingly be, whose products will increasingly be relied upon to make some important decisions. Is there anything that you're exposed to where you say, this should be reined in, or else ... Like any examples of specific product initiatives where you think there may be an opportunity to introduce some, finger quotes regulation?
I mean, I think, as you know, with the facial recognition technologies, Salesforce has committed to not supporting that, and not building and using it going forward. So corporations can make themselves and hold themselves accountable to actually institute their own type of regulations, right? And one might posit that you could use this construct of shareholder capitalism and the doing good by being good, that narrative, to then show other corporations how to show up and self-regulate. But to your point, the vast majority of corporations are not going to do this. They don't have incentive to. So what's the incentive model? Is it fear-based? Sometimes. But what I've noticed is that recently there's been this sort of like flaunting of regulations to begin with. If you flaunt the regulation, you'll get more funding. You're considered brilliant or more attractive because you're willing to sort of disrupt the themes to a certain degree. So I don't know if regulation is going to make an impact to a certain degree, but for the nascent startups that are being incented to push those boundaries, there's not going to be any recourse. And that sounds terribly morbid, but outside of federal regulation, peer pressure, there might be the responsibility of the individuals who are actually working in these companies to demand change, if they have the agency and the authority and the ability to do so. Like the individuals who have the flexibility to be able to lose their jobs and find jobs elsewhere, to take a stance and to ask for change. I could see that as being a potential fixer, but it's entirely optimistic.
So let's take a deep dive. So I know you've spent some time around Einstein, the AI platform at Salesforce. And what I know about Einstein, you could fit on the head of a pin, but I'm just going to posit this. So I can build a custom AI model. I can train it on my data and use Einstein to predict the value of, let's say, a field in a CRM app. And let's say the data that I use to train the model is biased, and it leads my team using the CRM app to, let's say, underinvest in a certain region that may, happen to be, because that region spends less money on a certain kind of product or something, where the data indicates a historical pattern and the pattern is based on data that was biased. And we're about to perpetuate that biased thought process in a model in a way that is incredibly naive and innocent. Nobody had bad intentions. Do you envision a time when an organization like Salesforce would instrument some kind of observability into these models to prevent or at least raise awareness about that kind of bias that seeps into the machine learning models?
We've talked about it, and we have built a couple of features that allow for the identification of fields that would be adjacent to something that might be used to create and generate bias, like zip codes, for instance, and then flagging that to the individuals that are using that data and that model so that they can make the decision to either proceed or not. So those features we've certainly considered and have actually built, particular with our Einstein discovery tools. And then we have another one that we are launching soon related to that as well. I think with Salesforce in particular, we're a platform, right? So all we can do is create frameworks for our customers to be able to make the right decisions with the data that we provide to them. So whilst it would be in the best interest of me and my team to create a suite of awesome ethical features that could be used by our customers, we recognize that not all customers are shaped the same. Not all customers have deep knowledge or even interest in ethics, and that honestly, when it comes to a fundamental cost for delivery, like the value of building a suite of ethical tools may not be the best investment if we don't have people who are using it. So what we can do is deliver against the ones that we know we can deliver against with clarity. To my point around zip codes, right, and identifying proxy fields for DEI issues and considerations. Beth, what I would love to see, honestly, is if you had the opportunity to actually stand up your Salesforce instance and do like a data audit, right? So here's the data that I'm going to put that I have either in my system or that I'm planning on entering into my system. Give me a scale, some sort of rating on the possible bias, and then either point me in the direction of tools that I can use to manage it, or at least inform me as to where the risk is so that I can make informed decisions about how I'm going to apply this data going forward with my Salesforce implementation. I think that would be the ideal state. In all reality, I believe maybe like 10% of our customers would be really thrilled and would use it out the gate, right? The rest would have to be trained and onboarded to the value and that is associated to it. Which I always come back to value when it comes down to it. To your earlier question, kind of bringing that back, one of the areas where I see there's an opportunity for like increasing adoption and interest in this space of AI and ethics in particular is sort of the risk management when it comes to like wholesale risk management. So how do you tether the AI ethical work that you are doing to lost revenue, right? And so if we create AI tools that clearly state the value of these ethical features and how much money you might be saving, then likelihood is higher that, our corporations would be a little bit more eager to adopt them. But that's hypothetical right now. All of that was hypothetical. But that would be a great future state, in my opinion.
So you're going to go on the record as 10% of customers would invest in or use features that are, quote, ethical because it's the right thing to do, and likely 90% wouldn't unless there was a clear economic advantage that they provided.
I wouldn't say the 90% wouldn't because of the clear economic advantage. I think the 90%, you have individuals that are laggards to technology. 90% don't, they're not going to unpack all of the features that are available, period, to the technology that they're using to digitally transform their business. So I imagine, and we've seen this already with the data that we've collected at Salesforce, that we have a 10%, like they do all the things. They love all the things. They'll give me all the things and I'll do it. The rest either don't have the resources to deliver against it, They don't have the skills to be able to deliver against it. They don't have the finances to be able to support these implementations. So I don't think it's lack of wanting to be good, whatever good means, right? But rather that they just are not going to be capable to be able to leverage them. And that capability might be motivation, and it might be lack of ability.
Excellent clarification. I like that. I like that explanation better.
Thank you for putting me on the pin for that one.
On the spot. We got that on the record. So a few weeks ago, Krishna, CEO of Fiddler, who I had mentioned, gave this interesting example about at Apple when they started issuing credit cards. I think it was back a few years ago. It turned out that these cards, which were backed by Goldman Sachs, were routinely issuing significantly more credit to the males than the females in two-income households. Same household, essentially same demographics, everything. But that was the outcome. And then when the Goldman Sachs team was asked to explain why that was the case, they said, well, it's just the algorithm. We don't know, it's just the algorithm. Huge technology fail, huge AI fail. Who is responsible for that? Someone's got to point the finger at themselves. And that's one of my concerns about the lack of regulation. What's your take on that?
The algorithm can't be the problem, right? Obviously. It's astonishing to me always when people point to technology as the actor when it is a host of hundreds of people who've built that technology. And then in the case of algorithms, reams and reams of data that have informed it. So if we want to get meta, you could point your finger at, historical data that has crafted that algorithm. So therefore, there's nothing that can be changed because it's built into the society. And so God forbid, table flip, I give up, it doesn't matter. We might as well just continue pace. That is also an easy way out, right? So to answer your question directly, the individuals that are responsible for shipping that algorithm should be held accountable for it insofar as they are willing to explain how they got to that algorithm's end state. And should they be lambasted and held up to trial? Like, I'm not in a position to state whether or not that's the case. That should be the case. But there should be some accountability of being responsible for building the algorithm and not doing the due diligence of taking the rigor to test it to ensure that the bias isn't going to have unintended consequences going forward. And particularly unintended consequences in areas that we know are like known areas of concern. Race, gender, this should be a no-brainer at this point. Like, just test it before you ship it. And that should be a part of the definition of done, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. When it comes to societal changes, like, I can't help you there. Right? Like, how do we change all this historical data? I've had thoughts about, like, what would it look like if there were organizations out there, and I think that there are few, that built large-scale data sets that have minimal bias. And I air quotes, you can't see them, but minimal bias all over the place. That's rife with complications and challenges. Just as a thought, like, how could I be the judge of what light bias is when I bring my own bias to the table? So that kind of goes back to the whole concept of you need a community of people who are attending to this. They have to be representative, all shapes and sizes, but also different parts of the organization and different disciplines and functions, so that you can craft sort of these consequence scanning sessions or risk management sessions with whatever you're going to deploy in a fairly rigorous way. And being a creature of process and habit, I have faith that this can be done if we're willing to commit and spend the time on it, right? We're able to commit and spend the time on large-scale clinical trials to ensure that harm is minimized. We can do the same thing with algorithms that we put to market.
Step zero is having more of these dialogues and realizing that as a technology community, we are responsible for data hygiene, and we are responsible for thinking through what if it goes wrong, what if it goes awry. And that's, I think, a level of accountability that me and my soapbox, but I don't think we've had as a community. And I want there to be more loud Kai voices out there, at least being willing to, like I said in the opener, speak truth to power and realize, that there are consequences, of some things that seemed innocuous before.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I have visions of changing the software development lifecycle so it thinks about the unintended consequences from the very beginning, where you think about who are the actors that you aren't designing for? What are their needs? What are the benefits of the thing that you're building? Who is the ultimate benefactor of the product that you're building? Recognizing that, but then perhaps even extending the value proposition outwards so that it can actually provide value more robustly. If we did that at the outset of every project, wouldn't that be grand? And then having these sort of steps within the software development cycle so that to the point that I made earlier, part of definition of done is actually having done these audits. Part of definition is done is gathering the data at the right time from the right actors and the right data sets, and having some agency and some interest in that data from the outset so that you're not using it to inform these crazy algorithms that you're putting out into the wild. And then to have some sort of retrospective built into the process, right? So how many times are products put out and hey, it's great, we did this, it's great, it's awesome, everyone's going to love it, and then there has to be some journalist or an internal researcher to raise the flags on what's gone wrong. That should be part of the process.
I got to get you off the hot seat. Unfortunately, I feel like we're just getting started. I knew this would happen, but I can't let you go without one last question. So you've got this amazing kind of personal mission to increase awareness about DEI and start to have dialogues around these concepts of ethical use of AI technology. As a community, how do we measure our progress? And when will you look back and say kind of the Kai personal mission will have been accomplished?
It's like there's a trend line, right? That's the measurement. And I'm hoping that it's a hockey stick, but I imagine it's probably going to be like moving slowly from the left to the right. And I think some of the measures of success will be that, well, the stories that we hear about the negative impacts of technology are diminished. And instead, we see an increase of the value proposition, the value that is being derived from technology at scale. And with all of the stuff that's happening right now around climate change and around social unrest, we can certainly track if things are getting better, right? We have a lot of data, so perhaps we could use that as our baseline because we can only go up from where we are right now. This is what I'm hoping. When it comes to personal measurement, from a DEI perspective, seeing more people like me at work, that's the ideal. Continuing to manifest and show up so that others can see me, and then we'll enter tech and we'll try to manifest change like I am trying to manifest. So that for me is a huge signal of success if I can see individuals who are substantially younger than me embarking upon their journeys in the space of software development and artificial intelligence.
How about this? When we have you back on the show, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we'll take out that as the metric and see how we're doing as a community. What do you say?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kai, this has been so much fun. I really enjoyed this, and I hope a lot of people listen to this because it's so important for everyone who has ever worked in technology and ever will work in technology. to be starting to think about these and making these kind of a part of the ethos of of the entire technology community. It's only going to get more challenging from here. I'd say it's not going to get easier, but we need more voices like yours out there. So just truly thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks. It was
You
great
bet.
being here.
Well, this is your host, Dan Turchin of AI and the Future of Work, signing off for this week, but back next week with another fascinating guest.